All right, so jumping into the Keynesian model, there's a bit of primer at the beginning of the chapter, which honestly we've already really covered in chapter 11, so good review, right? But let's jump right into the new material. So when we're dealing with the Keynesian model, our aggregate demand is staying the same. Our aggregate demand is still a steep downward sloping line. However, it's not entirely the same. It's got a little bit more of a tail to it. That's kind of the only distinction I can see, right? The other one kind of ended right here, but this one has a longer tail. So this we're going to call our aggregate demand 0. And you guessed it, there's going to be an aggregate demand 1 that's going to hit the graph in a second here. All right. Now let's deal with the wrench we're going to throw in the works here, right? So the Keynesian aggregate demand, aggregate supply model states that when we're at the price level that corresponds to our potential GDP, that this point here above this point, because it's potential GDP, right? So we talked last time about how the aggregate supply, the short run aggregate supply curve starts to slope much more drastically when we get to the right side of it, right? When we get into the neoclassical zone. Well, the Keynesian model takes that to the extreme and says when we're at potential GDP, the short run aggregate supply curve is a straight line up from whatever that price level is, and is a straight line horizontally from, again, whatever that price level is at that potential GDP. So if we're at the potential GDP, any kind of shift in aggregate demand is going to cause there to just be, that's not what I wanted. Come on, I'm trying to like do the same exact type. Help me out. Thank you. So any kind of shift to the right is going to only result in an increase in the price level. We're not going to get any stimulus to economic activity. The price level is going to go up, right? And then any decrease in aggregate demand from here is not going to have any impact on inflation or the price level. It's only going to have impact on economic activity. Price level stays the same. So when you're at potential output, any decrease in the aggregate demand only affects the output and not the prices. And any increase in aggregate demand only affects the prices and not the input. So we'll label this AD1. This is Y1 here. And P naught is exactly the same as P1 by definition. Questions on the Keynesian model. So the Keynesian model still has the short run aggregate supply as an important determinant, but now it is much more of an extreme case. Instead of just being something that, you know, is super convex and upward sloping eventually, it's something that is flat and then, you know, a slope of infinity, right? The greatest slope one can get.